Hello, people of Defend the House, and welcome back to another one of mine and Jameson's long talky videos. What we have decided to do is every 2 months we are going to do a review roundup of all the games that came out during those 2 months. First episode of this year is obviously January and February. And on the list, I think we have Resident Evil 7, Nioh on the PS4, and lastly, just making it in on the very edge of February is Horizon Zero Dawn, the big AAA PS4 game.
Yeah, so I don't think we're not going to record or review every game that came out in that time, in the 2 month period, because there are other things. But I think it's just good to sort of hit the big ones, 3 or 4 games. Yeah. If there are that many, it might just be one for a 2 month period over the summer. You never know, or nothing. But so those are the 3 that I think we spent the most time with over the last two months. Yeah, so those are the 3 that we're going to talk about.
Starting off with Resident Evil 7.
Yeah, man.
And I should be the one leading this conversation.
Yeah, you should be,
because I'm the person. I should be, because I'm the guy who likes horror more than you. I did get Resident Evil 7. I got it on PlayStation 4. And I intended for it to be my first proper PSVR experience, my first virtual reality full playthrough of a video game. But I got like an hour and a half in, and then I got a case of the nauseas, like really badly. I felt really, really ill. And we've talked about this, and I feel like it might have been a little bit my fault because I turned off like all the precautionary settings that they implement to make nausea less likely, like the rotational turning, where you kind of
weird
click.
snapping.
I don't know how to describe it. Yeah. When you turn on like segments. I turned all that off. And also I've been kind of ill with a virus for like the last month, and I've just been kind of putting it off because I can't tell you how unappealing it is to want to dive back in to a virtual reality horror game that might make you feel sick. It's almost like a roller coaster. When you go to like a theme park, you're like, oh god, this might make me sick and it might horrify me at the same time. That's what it's kind of felt like. So I've been waiting for my health to get better, and I've just been kind of riding on this bug for a while.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to go.
Just been putting it off.
You wouldn't want to go on a roller coaster while being actually sick.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But someone has played quite a lot of Resident Evil 7.
Yeah, so it's weird. I keep saying I don't like horror games, but there's probably been 6 over the last 3 years that I've played and really enjoyed.
You always give them a go.
Yeah, so I don't know. Outlast and Alien and Machine for Pigs and Soma and Resident Evil. So I don't know. Maybe I do like horror games. I don't know. I really didn't think RE7 was going to be worthwhile at all. I don't know about you, but I mean, I didn't really pay any attention to it.
It was also a very bizarre change of pace from the rest of the series, so it was kind of impossible to tell how it was going to be until it came out, because it kind of
just looked like an Outlast.
By Outlast, yeah.
So
I don't know.
Which is accurate to an extent, I think.
Influenced by it, for sure, I think.
Oh, definitely. And PT and other such big horror games over the last few years. But I think just to get it out of the way, I think I've played it through I played it through fully 3 times.
God.
Wow. And about halfway through an all collectibles playthrough. But I don't know if I'll ever get back to finishing that, because it was, there's more games coming out now.
That's part of the game. I don't understand this, because I'm an hour and a half in, and it just seems like a regular solid horror game. So all this speed running and redoing of the game that most of the people who are really into Resident Evil 7 have been doing, I just don't understand it.
Well, that's because you haven't really gotten to the core RE Resident Evil parts of that game yet. Because to
me, I'm deep in the Outlast parts.
Yes.
And it kind of just feels like people are I've just beat Outlast 3 times. I'm like, why?
Yeah, the first hour and a half is basically just Outlast. It's just really scripted, really linear. I mean, the whole game, obviously, but it's just corridors and jump scares and cutscenes and you running away from a big bad guy with nothing with no self defense or anything. And that I think that might be the least interesting part of that game, because after 90 minutes in, it to my understanding of what Resident Evil is, having never played a Resident Evil game, turns into Resident Evil, where it's like you've got guns,
monster things.
There are monsters, you can kill things, there's keys and collectibles and backtracking and boss fights and all these different things that the first hour and a half don't really put up front. And I think that what I like about this game, and probably the reason why I've replayed it several times, it's like this desire to overcome that game.
That's all horror, though, isn't it? That's kind of why you go into horror, to overcome your fear.
I suppose, yeah. The thing is, though, the game itself has a good ramp up of power and of overcoming it. You know, the first hour and a half is horrible, horrible nightmare, and it doesn't ever really stop being a horrible, horrible nightmare the first time through, but they do a good job of giving you like a lot of fucking guns in that game as you you get pistols and shotguns and there's a flamethrower and another gun, which I don't want to spoil for you.
Are you sure that's not tied to any of the difficulties?
No, my understanding is that everything is available on all difficulties. I did play through on easy my first time because I didn't want anything getting in my way. Like I didn't want to get stuck on something. Just knowing myself and how I like horror games, like if there's anything that will potentially stop me from playing it, I will take that as an advantage and be like, oh good, I don't have to play this anymore.
You mean like feeling nauseous and playing in virtual reality? That type of thing?
So like the first time through it, the whole game is a horrible nightmare, even though you are getting more and more comfortable with the game as you go through it the first time. And the last hour and a half is sort of just like, it's actually really different from the rest of the game, and it's actually really sort of combat heavy, which I didn't mind. But the second and third times through the game, it was like, oh, this isn't scary. I beat it, Resident Evil. I'm not afraid of you. This is, oh yeah, you popped out. Oh, a spooky guy. Oh no, I'm so afraid. And there was something cathartic about replaying it several times. And there are a lot of things to find in that game and a lot of fun, silly unlockables to get by speedrunning it or getting all the coins or something. And
that's good to hear, actually, because the only Resident Evil I've ever had kind of like a vast amount of experience with is the fifth one.
Right.
I played a lot of 5. When 5 came out, that was kind of the time where the Halo 3 Mythbuster community was kind of thriving. So there was a lot of people co-oping and playing with each other, and that game really, what's the word I'm looking for? Promoted coming back and playing that game over and over again. But 5 was quite an arcadey game. Mm-hmm. It seemed quite action heavy, and I didn't really think 7 was going to be that. So that was why I was quite surprised when people were replaying 7, because it didn't seem like a gameplay heavy arcadey shooter which was fun enough to come back. I really thought it was going to be kind of a dedicated horror experience, but I'm kind of excited to hear that it's worth coming back to, because I presume that means it's pretty fun to play.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, a lot of the like most logical way to do it would be like play it through several times and get as many unlockables as possible, and then play it on the hardest difficulty with all these different bonuses. Like you can get sneakers that allow you to move faster, and a really powerful starting gun and a circular saw and things like that. And I think that's probably why they're there, is for people to, you know, make the super hard difficulty easier. But yeah, it's interesting. I had never played one of them before, which I know makes me just the worst. And I didn't know what to expect from Resident Evil, and it was interesting to see like that there are all sorts of puzzle doors, you know, and it's like, oh, you got to find these things, and where are they? And then you use like the weird horse head to open the door, and there's some horrible, ridiculous bosses in this game, and different things like that, which I was surprised by. And I thought that the story is not like super interesting, but it was interesting enough to keep me going. They do a good job of mixing things up along the way. Like if it had just stayed as an Outlast game throughout the whole thing, I think it would have suffered. And I think if it had just been like really combat heavy throughout the whole thing, it also would have suffered because the combat's not, it's not like a dedicated first person shooter. It's a survival horror shooter where it's like the combat isn't easy.
Yeah.
It's sort of deliberately hard to execute in the combat.
In the VR headset, you aim with your sight,
right.
with your face.
You just look,
which is kind of jarring at first, but I went a few firefights, and it pretty much works. I think it's a little bit clunky, but I kind of feel like all the Resident Evil games are kind of clunky in their shooting, and that's kind of what builds up tension. In 4 and 5, you kind of felt a little bit vulnerable when you were shooting, so I don't really mind that. Kind of looking at people to shoot them. It's kind of weird, but the novelty of VR is actually pretty damn good. I'm only an hour and a half in, but I'm excited to get back into it, actually.
I think that's part of like that's what makes a survival horror game. It's just like, oh, the combat's not super easy. If it played like Halo, it would be like, oh, this is easy and not scary. So yeah, the combat is sort of deliberately clunky. But it makes taking enemies down really satisfying. And I'm sure you will have some great nightmare times later on in VR, because there's some horrifying shit in this game. And that's cool. That's maybe like the most impressive thing about it, is the way it takes from like a dozen different other horror genres and tropes and movies and games, and just sort of almost deliberately blatantly copies them. But it manages to come together as a really cohesive feeling horror experience. Like the first, there's like the blatant ripoff of the ending of Blair Witch Project with the guy standing up against the wall. There's cheap jump scares. There's Outlast type monster chases. There's body horror. There's stuff like that feels like it's taken right out of the movie Wreck. There's stuff that feels like it's.
Oh God! So I just think about Wreck, and now I don't want to go back in. The
stretchy lady at the end of Wreck is.
Oh my God!
There's something reminiscent of that in this game.
Fuck!
But yeah, like as I was playing it, you can like really clearly see all the influences that they're taking from, and most of the time when horror borrows like this blatantly from other sources, it just doesn't work, but it works really well for this. And there's some Saw-like stuff with the other guy with the younger brother in the family, sort of in the middle of the game, and it just all comes together really well, and it results in the game always feeling different, like always feeling fresh and never really repetitive. And I think that is one of its biggest successes. And also, I'm just thinking about playing some of that stuff in VR, and I would never want to do that, even knowing all of it. VR sounds like a nightmare.
It is horrifying. For anyone who's played Resident Evil 7, I got up to the boss fight with the dad. I don't think that's really much of a spoiler, but it's in the garage. And that's where I got to. I got a bit past that, and then my stomach started to feel bad, and I haven't come back since. But my first hour/2 hours in virtual reality were pretty neat. It looks pretty damn ugly in places. It's not a shiny game, especially when it's like up to your nose.
It's too bad, because it looks really sharp on the PS4 Pro and I think on PC. But yeah, that's just headset limitations. Anyways,
yeah, it don't look so good. But the sensation of kind of creeping around in the house and having the ability to actually poke your head around corners using the headset is like really immersive, even if the game doesn't look amazing. And it's just like, it's horrifying when you actually feel like you're really there.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much I wish I could have peeked around corners. Did Outlast have that? I don't remember.
Possibly.
I can't remember, but I just so many times wanted to do like the little Dishonored, peek around the corner.
Yeah.
Like it would have made some of that stuff less terrifying.
Well, every time I peek around the corner, I think something's going to be right there.
Yeah.
Which is part of the horror. So sometimes I don't even want to do it.
Yeah. So maybe it wouldn't make it any less terrifying. I don't know. I bet outside of VR, peeking around a corner would be less scary than peeking around the corner in VR.
Yes.
But there were a lot of times, but just like mechanically when you're being chased by Jack or whatever his name is, it would have been nice to have been able to look around the corner and been like, oh, he's right there, instead of having to like literally walk around the corner and be like, oh shit, he's right there.
That's when it first started becoming really useful.
Right.
Because you can really peek as well. Like, you can like really crank all over the place.
I've actually noticed in subsequent replays that the AI, they have a very narrow field of vision when it comes to spotting you. But
cool.
So I don't know. Resident Evil, I just really didn't. I had paid no attention to it. I did not expect to play it, let alone play it 3 times and really enjoy it. It's one of those rare instances where it's like, here's an entire type of game that I just don't think I like, and then I play it and it turns out, oh, this is great.
I'm excited. I'm excited to get back into it. I have been doing my absolute best not to go into it non-VR. I said I was going to beat the whole game VR, and it was more because I wanted to fully test the technology and finally beat a full-length AAA game inside virtual reality. And because of my illness, the temptation to go in non-VR has been so strong, because I don't have to set up the PSVR, and there's wires everywhere, and I don't have to worry about feeling nauseous, and it's just kind of more chilled out and not intensely terrifying. And I've almost crumbled so many times, especially this week, leading up to this review, because I wanted to talk a bit more about it. But I've held off, and I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till I feel good, and then I'll probably do it in maybe a few sessions, and I'll try out those anti-nausea settings, and hopefully I don't feel bad again.
To my understanding, it sounds like if you can play through the whole game in VR for your first time, that is the way to do it.
Cool.
Which, so I also thought that playing Resident Evil 7, I'd be like, oh, I should go back to some of these older RE7 or Resident Evil games. Yeah. And I tried out the RE1 remake that was on, it was like a PlayStation Plus game recently, so it was free entry, just download, play it. Made it about 5 minutes into the actual gameplay before uninstalling it.
That game's fucking hard, man.
Couldn't do it. And then
so difficult.
Bought and played about 5 or 10 minutes of RE4, and the same thing. I was like, nope. Turns out
that's a shame.
A big part of why I liked RE7 is that it's first person. It moves and feels like a modern game, right? It's a first person game. You can just move and shoot and do all that. I think like structurally, I'm sure I would enjoy all the old RE games, but them being like weird tank control, third person, stop and shoot, it's just they're from an older era, and I would
be kind of exhausting. It's kind of like The Evil Dead. It's non-stop stress, inventory management, and space management, like trying to figure out where I can stand and shoot without getting destroyed. They're very, very stressful games.
Yeah. So, I don't like the older Resident Evil games, whatever. But if they did more like this, and were able to be as creative with it for a next game, I would play it. And I will wait until I'm going to go and play all the DLC once it's all out.
Yeah, eventually. I was just about to say that. I think they're supporting it quite a lot, aren't they, with downloadable content? And
they're doing some free DLC, some of it's story, some of it, like the 2 packs they put out have been seemingly pretty varied in terms of what's in them, which is cool. I'm just checking my notes here. I beat that game in 3 sittings the first time. That's very abnormal for me.
It's quite short, isn't it?
I took about 8 hours with it.
Oh, okay.
On easy, my first time. And then, you can speedrun it in 3. But I think if you played on normal the first time, it's probably like, 10 hours, which is solid. And I thought there were interesting differences between easy, normal, and Madhouse, I think is the hard difficulty.
Ooh, that sounds scary.
The enemies have more animations on the harder difficulties, which I thought is really interesting. They were substantially harder to hit because of their animations on, like, even between easy and normal. I was surprised at how much harder they were to hit.
Great.
Which is cool. The only negative really that stands out to me is like there's only 3 enemy types in the whole game, or 4. Yeah. And there's a lot of combat in the last hour and a half. Like the whole last third of the game is a big departure from the rest of it and is substantially weaker than the rest of the game. Even though I still enjoyed the last third, it is very different from what everything else in that game is. But yeah, front runner for biggest surprise in the 4 games that I've played this year. I really didn't expect to enjoy it, and I did. So that's cool. Good job. If you want a horror game, go play Resident Evil 7.
It has got some pretty damn good reviews, and I'm pretty surprised by the reception. And I'm very excited to go back in. And I'm kind of happy for them, because when you take a risk with a franchise, it's a bit of a spooky thing. All the fans are a bit worried. And I'm not sure if everyone was 100% happy with the change of style. But I'm glad that it sold well, it was received well, and that they seem to kind of blend Resident Evil 7 with their new image, or their new ambition. I'm glad it went well for them. Risks are scary things.
Especially after 6, because 6 seemed like the biggest stinker in a long while. And then they did it. Resident Evil has had some rough games over the last few years, like over the last 6 or 7 years, in fact. And good for them for reinventing it and being successful, and also for putting out a fully AAA big budget feature 10-hour long game in virtual reality. They built it for VR basically, and that's super cool. I hope we see more stuff like that in the future.
What I've seen so far is good. It works in VR. I just kind of want to vomit sometimes.
Yeah, well,
I'll fix that and I'll go back.
So, speaking of highly reviewed surprises that only one of us have played.
There you go. There's a theme.
Nioh.
This was something that I've had on my radar for a while, because I'm a bit of a fanboy of the From Software Souls series. And I can't remember where I first saw it, maybe just some random demo at an E3 or something.
Yeah, they did a couple of betas for it, I think, as well.
Yeah, it didn't really feel like anyone was talking about it. But I feel like nowadays, there's so many sources to kind of look at reviews for games and footage of games, that sometimes, even when games get no marketing, like Until Dawn, things can still sneak up and then kind of just slowly snowball. And I feel like Nioh was one of those things where no one knew about it. And then I picked it up on release because I'm a nerd and I wanted a Dark Souls game. And then within a few days, it seemed like a lot of people were actually trying it and playing it, and it was reviewing really well. So let's talk about Nioh. I haven't played it. I haven't beaten it. It's a really long game.
Sounds like it.
I think, I don't know if there is a stat which tells me how long I've been playing.
I'm going to see what Go ahead.
I reckon I'm like 40 hours in.
Yeah, it says main story on how long to beat is roughly 35 hours, and completionist is 86.
I've been doing every side quest that I can find.
So, I don't know anything about Nioh. I will never play it because I don't really care for the Souls games. Like Bloodborne, I only liked really because of all the art. The world and enemies was so their design. The art in that game is astounding, and it was probably 90% of why I played that game, is just to go through it and be like, holy shit, these artists are, oh my god.
Especially in Bloodborne.
Yeah. Bloodborne is, whew. Anyways, so it's a Dark Souls-like, but it's got side quests?
It's really interesting, because I can't personally think of any other game which is so shamelessly just taken the foundations of another game and then just kind of put a fresh coat of paint on it and tweaked it a bit. This is just a Dark Souls game, essentially.
Is it though? Because there's my understanding is that it's mission-based and there's loot and...
Well, let's get into it.
Okay,
because there's actually a lot going on in Nioh. I'm going to try not to talk about it for too long, but the foundations of the game are Dark Souls. It has the souls, the bosses, the difficulty, the weapon, even the stances in the game. I don't want to go into too much detail because it's a really, really deep game. I can talk about it forever. But even the stances in the game can kind of replicate the way that weapons changed in Bloodborne. In Bloodborne, you could kind of manipulate weapons, which isn't quite the same as stances, but I feel like it was still kind of formatted around that idea. And it takes a while playing Nioh for it to kind of eventually blossom into its own thing. I actually think Nioh does some things better than Dark Souls and some things worse than Dark Souls. And it's going to be impossible for me to review Nioh without comparing it to Dark Souls.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, like, the fucking HUD and fog doors and boss health bars, like, I mean, yeah.
Is basically, it's for Dark Souls fans.
Yeah.
The one main thing, I'll just start with a negative, because there's a lot of things I like about Nioh. The one thing that just can't live up to what From Software does, which you can't blame them for, is the level and enemy design. Because as we were just talking about with Bloodborne and with the later Souls games, they look amazing. And the enemy variation in the Souls games is just staggering. There's just so many new encounters. Every single level is just jam-packed with horrific looking enemies, and Nioh doesn't really have that. It is, as you can see from the footage, it is based in feudal Japan. I think that's what they call that.
With a D.
Oh, is it? I don't even know what the what you call the lore. It's like Japanese mythological god stuff. There is a name for it, kind of like Greek mythology with the Greek gods.
Yeah, I know exactly. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but yeah, fuck.
Yeah, I have no idea about that stuff. But the environments, they're okay. They're pretty interesting. They're not up to the fun fantasy levels that the Souls series reaches. But when it comes to enemies, it actually has quite a low variance of enemies in Nioh. But I would say every encounter with enemies in Nioh is vastly more difficult than Dark Souls. And what the enemy variation has reminded me of in Nioh is actually Doom. And I think I was watching, I think it was the NoClip documentary, and he mentioned the term combat chess.
Sure.
Where instead of having a bunch of pawns, you have a king and a queen, and then you have to learn how to adapt to each one of those specific enemies.
It's sort of like Halo, where it's like there are 5 enemy types, but it's the way the AI and environments and all that combine to make every encounter feel like its own thing.
Yeah,
right.
I feel like Nioh goes more down that path, where you have you have a Cyclops, and then you have a big demon, and then one level later, that big demon will have 2 swords instead of 1 sword, and he kind of behaves completely differently. And once you learn to deal with that enemy, the next time you encounter them, you feel powerful because you're knowledgeable about their attacks, and they're very scripted. In Dark Souls, things feel quite wild, and I feel like whenever I fight a boss or some sort of enemy, even though I know how it behaves, I still feel like it might destroy me and rip my face off. But in Nioh, once I learn how something moves, I feel really in control and I feel kind of powerful. And then that gets completely taken away from you when a new enemy gets introduced and it just destroys you. And I kind of like that. I think if it followed the Dark Souls route of having like just hundreds of different enemies, it would have felt really, really close to Dark Souls. And even when it comes to From Software's stuff, all they do in their franchise is kind of twist little elements, add a gun, make it a bit faster, and it really does make it feel like a pretty unique game. And I think Nioh has taken a few steps to twist the format into making it feel like a really different experience. And not only having less enemy variance, but the biggest thing is the way stamina works. I don't want to get too deep into like semantics because it will bore people who don't care about the franchise. But in Nioh, you can actually see the enemy stamina. Which is completely different, because in Dark Souls you can't see that and it doesn't actually come into play in the combat at all. But in Nioh, if you run out of stamina, you are pretty much doomed. I think in the Souls series...
Do you think they're aware of you running out of stamina?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
That'd be interesting.
But when you run out of stamina, you can't move, so you're pretty much absolutely hopeless and you're going to get destroyed. Where in the Souls games, I think you just can't dodge or block very well if you completely run out of stamina. But in Nioh, if your stamina is depleted, you're just doomed. But the flip side is if you manage to drain the enemy stamina, you can also inflict a very damaging, powerful move, kind of like the backstab in Dark Souls. And there's this kind of interesting cat and mouse aspect to the combat where you can kind of see that the enemy has like a quarter of their stamina left. And you know that if you beat them up a few more swings, then they're going to be empty, and you can do a powerful move. but then at the same time, you have kind of a low amount of stamina. So if you misjudge it and you run out of stamina, you're screwed. But if you judge it right and you knock their stamina down, then you're going to kill them. And it's a cool part of the game because you can watch the enemies. You can learn, like, if there's a big enemy with a heavy axe, you know that if he does his spin attack, it takes away like 75% of his stamina. And then you can wait and then just go mad on him and usually knock him down. And it's like quite a deep layer of combat is added by this simple mechanic, and it's probably the best part of the game. It feels really, really satisfying when you judge it just right, you knock their stamina down, and then you finish them off. And I didn't think it was going to be a big part of the game, but it's really, really cool, and it takes a lot of getting used to. There's actually I think people compare it to Gears of War with the active reload.
Right.
You actually have to do that to your stamina to replenish it quickly. Otherwise, it replenishes really slowly. And if you're not doing that, you pretty much die in boss fights. Some people don't like that. Some people don't like the active reload because it means you have to focus on something outside of the game. But I'd say like 10 to 15 hours in, it kind of becomes like muscle memory.
Right.
And you just don't forget to push it. And if you do forget to push it, you get punished. And it's like this extra layer of combat. And there's a lot of layers in Nioh. It just keeps on going. And there's so much to learn. In Dark Souls, you kind of just go and you kill, and if you die, you just learn and then you kill. But in Nioh, there's a lot of subsystems to learn in the game. Every weapon has its own skill tree. Your player has skill tree. There's like 2 different types of magic.
Oh God.
There's a lot going on in the game.
Does it have? Okay, 2 things. First, is it open? Is it sort of like Dark Souls where it's like not an open world, but it's this sort of sprawling, interconnected world that you're just basically always in? No? Oh.
It is not, no. Each level is separate. The side quests are also separate things on like an overview map.
Do you think that takes away from it, or because the world isn't as interesting, the different structure doesn't really negatively impact it?
I think it's almost so impressive what From Software does with level design that you don't even look at it as a negative when some other developer can't accomplish it.
Right.
Because I don't even know how they do that. When I first played Dark Souls and like you were activating the lifts and everything was connected, it was mind-blowing. I have no idea how they designed that. And I don't blame Team Ninja for just not doing it. Because it's just crazy. And I think it also allows them in Nioh to kind of make more diverse settings. Some are in like wintry mountains and some are like on a ship and stuff like that. I think Dark Souls still somehow manages to create really varied environments. They're just great. From Software are just too good at what they do and they can't be beaten. But no, it didn't really bother me that much. I don't think it took away from the game. It's just more impressive that From Software accomplishes it.
Right, yeah. And then do you think, does it have, and I know you haven't, put insane time into it, but does it have like the variety that the Souls games, not Bloodborne, because it was pretty much just you play with the axe or the whatever and use it through the whole game. But the first Souls game especially, or Demon Souls and then more so Dark Souls, it's like you can play one-handed, two-handed, shield, magic, like this, that, like, people really got into all of the different ways that you could play that game.
Yeah.
Is this similar, do you think?
I kind of like listed at the end of my ramble there about all the variations of things. And there's a lot of different ways to tackle this game. Instead of really building a class, you kind of pick a weapon and you main that weapon, if you know what I mean. You have sword, dual swords, an axe. I use a spear because whenever I play Dark Souls, I like the halberds because I like having distance between me and the enemies. There's a really bizarre weapon. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a knife on a chain. I can't remember what it's called. And there's a skill tree per weapon. So instead of just kind of picking up weapons and using whatever you find, which you can do, but you kind of specialize in a specific weapon and moveset and set of skills, and then you learn how to use that. So you kind of build a class around a specific type of weapon. Weird. Which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
There's also moves per weapon, kind of like a fighting game, like holding down triangle, square, and all that sort of thing. There's a lot to learn per weapon. I'm sure there is someone out there who is a master in all of them, but I've just used spears for 40 hours, and I love the spears. I'm glad I picked them. But some people are saying that this kind of knife on a chain thing is the best weapon. I'm like, yeah, I use the spear. I feel good about it. And I've started dabbling in magic. There's also bows. Bows are pretty damn good. And there's guns. I forgot, but there's guns
Oh my
as well.
God.
I completely forgot.
Jesus.
There's so much going on.
Wow.
There's guns and bows in this game as well. There's so much.
It sounds like, I think the Souls games, it's like this fairly even combination of gameplay and world, equal parts. Whereas this sounds like it's gameplay.
Yes.
Like systems and gameplay first, second, and third. Whereas Dark Souls, it's sort of, it's sort of a little bit of everything.
It's more of an RPG approach to the format as well, because I haven't even gotten to the loot system, and oh boy, the loot system is the most intimidating and intense thing ever, especially as I am someone who doesn't have any experience with the Diablo series. The loot system in this game is based off of the Diablo games. You find like a weapon per enemy that you kill, and at the end of the level, you have like 500 swords. That's an exaggeration. You literally have like 50 helmets and like 20 pairs of shoes, and you have to go through each of them, compare like these minute stats. And at the beginning of the game, it was like mind-numbing. I had no idea what I was doing. And then when you go to the blacksmith, there's like 7 different things that you can do straight away. It's like reforging, resmithing, and then there's like soul sharing, and then you're like, I don't fucking know what any of this means. And then you can sell stuff for money, or you could break it down into parts, or you can sell stuff for souls. And weapons almost turn into like a commodity, and you kind of decide where to split them. Do I want resources, money? And it was like really, really overwhelming. And for a long time, the loot system was like my main negative. I was like, I don't like this. And actually, I will say that for me, it is a negative, and I've just kind of pushed past it to a part of the game where I'm just kind of stocked out with like rare weapons. Everything I'm wearing is purple, so I can kind of just like push away all the white and the yellow graded items, which makes things way quicker. But at the beginning, it was so overwhelming, and I guess Team Ninja like that loot system. They're probably Diablo fans, and some people love that shit. Some people love the loot, but when it comes to a game which is so combat action heavy, it felt really weird to be sitting around in a menu looking at statistics for like 10 minutes after every level. And I don't really think it needed that. I don't really think it worked. There was kind of a unique sense of discovery when it comes to the blacksmith specifically, because it gives you like brief descriptions, and you kind of have to figure out for yourself like what is actually worth it, like what's the best value. Like, I only just realized that if you forge your own weapons, it's actually way more better than just leveling up weapons using souls, etc. They're not called souls. It's called, like, enter Japanese word here. I don't know. I can't remember. I haven't played it in 2 weeks. But it's really in-depth.
I'm gonna pass out.
There's more going on than it seems in Nioh when you first play it. I really thought it was going to be Dark Souls with a Japanese skin on it.
Yeah.
But it really is built on the foundations of Dark Souls into quite an in-depth Japanese action RPG.
Cool.
And
are you liking it? So you like it?
Yes,
yeah.
I do. I should probably say I do like the game. I do like the game. It was a bit of a risk, kind of trying to make a Dark Souls-esque game, because it's got a very passionate community, and some people are going to go in and see that it doesn't play like Dark Souls. It doesn't have the variation and the design that Dark Souls has. It tries to do the level stuff. If you remember in Dark Souls levels, you could unlock shortcuts and everything kind of loops around. They have that in like the self-contained levels, which is good. It feels good. But it's got some differences, and I like both of them separately. I think the thing I like most about Nioh is the changes to combat. It feels more difficult, but when you understand the enemies, you feel strong and powerful. Whereas in Dark Souls, you kind of consistently feel like you're gonna die all the time, and you feel hopeless and stressed. And in Nioh, it's quite empowering when you do good, and you do good because you know what the enemy's gonna do. And I feel like the boss fights kind of play out in that way. In Dark Souls, I actually beat some bosses first time in Dark Souls because I just kind of got a bit lucky. And in Nioh, there's no fucking chance. You just go in and you just get absolutely shredded. But then 5 deaths later, you're kind of like, I think I'm starting to get this. And then when you do beat the boss, you kind of dominate the boss because you know exactly what they're going to do. And some people might think it's kind of less impressive that they're kind of formulaic and predictable and not kind of wild. But I think it's more fun. I found it kind of stressful when in Dark Souls, it's my 48th time trying a boss. I know all his stuff, but like sometimes he spins, and I'm like, I didn't think he was going to hit me, but he did hit me. Yeah. And it was kind of refreshing in Nioh to feel like I know what this boss is going to do, and then you just beat him because you were good and you knew it. It's different, but I really like it. Some people haven't really kind of fitted into it very well. They haven't really enjoyed it, which is fine. It tries something different, even though it doesn't look like it tries something different. And I'm pleasantly surprised by Nioh.
Yeah, it seems like generally it's people really like it, which is cool. Good. It was in development for a decade, so cool for them to manage to put something together after a lot of time and make something somewhat unique while also, obviously borrowing a lot from the very popular Souls games. And who knows if we'll ever get another From Souls game? Yeah. I mean, I guess it's only been a year since Dark Souls, or since 3, but that sort of yearly Dark Souls void has seemingly been filled, which is cool.
Yes,
by someone else.
There's so much From Software stuff to go back to.
Yeah,
and I feel like the Souls games are very replayable. So if Team Ninja came along and kind of took the stage and were the only people dishing out like a AAA game with this format, I'd be pretty happy. I know some people wouldn't be. Some people would miss the Dark Souls stuff, but I personally really like what Nioh has done.
Cool.
It takes a while to blossom into its own thing, but it does have its own ideas, and it is a unique game separate from Dark Souls, and it's good stuff. I look forward to going back to it.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that it is doing its own things, because just glancing at gameplay, it's like, oh wow, this is just Dark Souls. But
yes,
that's cool to hear that there's a lot more uniqueness to it, which is good, because I think just like a blatant Souls ripoff is a little, I don't know.
Yeah, they did a good job.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of games which take from other games, like shamelessly.
Of course, yeah.
And you can do that as long as you put your own creative twist on it and make it into your own thing.
Yeah.
And they did that.
Good
shit.
Sweet. Oh, before we start, disclosure, we got a copy from Sony. So
yeah, Sony,
take
Sony
that
likes
as you
it
will.
When you say that.
Take that as you will.
We were paid.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of money.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't trust the opinion of someone who's been given a game for free, that's fine. I understand. But at the same time,
if you don't trust people who have been given a copy of Horizon, there's nowhere on the internet to get reviews of Horizon because they were throwing that game out.
Oh yeah, and that's fair. Like I understand if someone said that. It's you don't know you don't know any of these people, so how can you? But whatever. It's not the first time we've gotten a game for free, so.
Well, no,
and it's not like we're the only people that are going to say positive things about Horizon. So.
Well, we got Destiny, and we didn't praise Destiny.
I don't want to talk about Destiny ever again.
Too intensely.
So
where do we start with this game?
Okay, let's just go back slightly before release and regarding expectations, because that'll probably help us focus a little bit. Okay. The first reveal of this game was like one of the most exciting E3 reveals in a very long time, because I don't care for Sony's, they like to announce sequels to games that are for a bit of a niche audience, and are often sequels or remakes or remasters that are coming out a long time from now and are sort of pipe dreams. Final Fantasy VII remake.
Yeah.
And so, seeing that, it was like, okay, here's a big brand new IP from a big studio. It looks amazing. The world looks super exciting. And then, flash forward 18 months to almost release. I was going into Horizon expecting it to be a fun playing game with a neat world, and that was about it. I didn't expect much in the way of storytelling, because Guerrilla, look, Killzone 2 and 3, I like them a lot. I think they're really cool looking, good playing first person shooters that they feel different from other things out there, and I think they did good things for first person there aren't a lot of first person shooters that you think of when you think about the PlayStation 3, and those ones just stand out, and I think they are really quality games, but they are not story games in any way.
No.
And Shadowfall was a bit of a turd.
Oh, I forgot about that game.
Even if it was made by one of their other studios within Guerrilla. So they have a good history of making good looking games, but not telling an interesting story. And so really the biggest surprise, I think, and the best place to start with Horizon is the fact that they made a game with a fascinating world and managed to tell a great story in that world and make the most appealing part of their game actually be the writing, which is a huge surprise.
It is a huge surprise. I think I was the same as you, where I've kind of transitioned into that part of being a gamer where I'm getting old and I'm skeptical and I see something that's really shiny and part of my brain kind of just feels like it's all show and we're going to get this kind of fun action game and you're going to kill a dinosaur robot and then it's going to kind of feel the same for the rest of the game and you're just going to get that first wow factor, and then is it just going to keep repeating and get old? And I just thought it was going to be focusing on the robots. I thought that was going to be the big thing. Look, we got robot dinosaurs, kids, it's awesome, and then you can shoot them with the arrows.
And it's sort of like, on its surface, a shallow concept. It's like, ooh, tribes versus robot dinosaurs. It's like straight out of 1985, and you're like, wow, that would make a fun comic or whatever.
It does sound silly, yeah.
What can they actually do with this? Turns out a lot.
Turns out a lot.
Which is really surprising.
Hell,
we will not touch spoilers, don't worry. No. Because it is so new, and the biggest joy is exploring and learning about that world. But this, okay, let me be hyperbolic for a second, okay?
Yeah.
I think this is one of the most exciting game experiences I've had in I don't know, a decade.
Ooh.
No, okay, that's a little ridiculous, but there's a certain type of excitement and enjoyment you get from a game that is new and fresh, and it reminds me of playing Mass Effect for the first time or BioShock for the first time, where it's oh, here's this crazy new world that's actually full of really interesting things to learn about, and you don't know what to expect, and there's a constant feeling of excitement, which I don't get from games very often anymore because everything is so sequel driven.
Horizon is like a perfect storm of everything which makes great sci-fi games great. In 2015, I put Soma until 2016 video, but I put Soma as my number one game of 2015, and that was because of the storytelling. It wasn't up there because I enjoyed sneaking around in the spaceship avoiding ghouls. It was because I loved the world and the story and the characters and the concepts I thought was so fun. Horizon, I think, is more interesting than Soma easily.
Because it's bigger, yeah.
It's more intelligent, it's more creative, and on top of that, you're not just walking around in a spaceship. You're exploring an incredibly beautiful world, and they made a combat system which is phenomenal. One of the best, definitely the best in open world games ever, by far, and maybe one of the most intense and exciting versions of, I guess, third-person action games just ever. It's just so much stuff in this game that are just at the peak of its game, and it does 3 to 4 incredible things that some games just focus on.
That's what's surprising. It's with an open world game, you always expect compromise, right?
Yes.
Ubisoft games, they never have an interesting story. Witcher 3, there's all the story you'll ever want and need, but the combat, it's the combat's fine. Yeah. There's instances where it's great, but it's mostly just serviceable. Or MGS5, the best playing action game of maybe ever. But like, oh wait, the world is mega boring and the story is a disaster. This game, it's like, okay, it looks fucking unbelievable. It sounds really good. The voice acting is good. The writing is amazing. The world design is great. The gameplay is really fun. The side quests and leveling and RPG systems and world are all good. It's like, oh, wait, it just ticked all the boxes.
It really...
and then some.
It kind of just nails everything it attempts. And it kind of feels like one of the most worked on and polished games I've played in a very long time.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So, okay, gameplay-wise... Well, no, not gameplay-wise. World structure-wise, it's Far Cry.
Yeah.
Essentially, you know, there are outposts, there are towers, there's stealth in the combat and tagging enemies and all that. And when I heard that, I was kind of like, Far Cry. I never really liked the Far Cry games, I'm not going to lie. They never clicked for me because the gameplay I always found to be... it just never satisfied me. Like, I just never found any fun in the gameplay, really, in Far Cry. And, of course, there are, like all the Ubisoft games, thousands of things on the map.
Overwhelming.
And they're all super shallow. And... one of Horizon's great strengths is restraint in using systems from other games. It takes a lot of different ideas from a lot of different open world games of late, but it doesn't jam-pack the game with those things. So it's like, yes, there are towers in Horizon that you have to climb and it reveals the map, but there are 5 of them. Oh, and also they're giant... mega amazing beautiful robot dinosaurs.
That does help. That helps.
You know, the Witcher sense, yeah, they like pulled that directly. And if I were to fault something with like The Witcher 3, it relies too much on the Witcher sense.
Yeah.
There's a little too much of like, oh, let's follow this track to the body, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not perfect, but yeah, the way they take things from different games and use them and bring them all together is kind of crazy. Like, and then, but the gameplay itself is the thing that feels like, oh, this is the new thing they brought to the game.
Oh yeah.
Which I think we should touch on for a while, because bow combat is not, I don't know, bow combat, it's hard to make that feel satisfying and exciting, I find.
I feel like it's been like a new trend in games ever since Far Cry and Tomb Raider.
Yeah. But the bow combat in those never, and maybe it's just because you're just shooting. There are like 3 enemy types. There's, you know, a regular guy, a sniper, and then a heavy guy with armor on. Maybe that's why the bow combat never feels good. But in this, it's pretty much your main attack method, and turns out, you know, there's 25 different types of robots,
I think so, yeah,
and probably 15 or 18 of those are horrible nightmares to fight.
Yes,
they're so stressful.
The robots are difficult. They are difficult to kill.
Yeah,
and I think every single one of them can kick your ass if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah.
I think the further along the game you get, you kind of stop worrying about watchers and striders. Yeah. But I don't think... I could play that game for 100 hours more. I don't think I'd ever feel confident against like a Stormbird or a Rockbreaker. Ever.
Ever. They really do a good job of making the enemies, especially the further into the game you get, they make them big and loud and in your face and intimidating with a ton of different attacks.
Yeah.
And they're so aggressive. Like,
oh yeah.
I only noticed it like 25 hours into the game or so, but like after every fight, I was noticing that like, oh my god, my heart is pounding. and that persisted. Intense.
And they last a long time. Like when you get into your first fight with like a Thunderjaw, it's like a 5-minute ordeal, which is a long time for like a one-on-one fight with something in a video game.
Yeah, and then it ends and you're like, whew, oh my god, that was brutal. And that wasn't a boss fight. It was just, you just stumbled across it in the world. And they do a great job with weapon variety as well. Like there are
there's loads.
A ton of different weapons that offer a really surprising array of ammunition types. Like
I
even
thought this is a very small point, but I thought it was a really fun and unique design in the game where they have a rarity of weapons, the usual purple, blue going downwards, but instead of just making them more powerful, they just linked a brand new ammo type to each rarity, which is really, really exciting because you would go through the store and you would just see like the standard bow, which you've been using, but it's a purple bow and it has 2 different arrows which you don't know what they are. And it's like this small part of excitement where you're like, oh my god, I can't afford this bow and I have no idea what these new arrows do. And every time you upgrade, or I should say just replace your weapon with a one of higher variety, you get to experiment with the same weapon but with different ammunition, which completely changes the way you fight. I just thought that was a really cool and unique twist on the system.
Yeah, and there's tremendous variety. Like, I fully respect the way I was playing the game a couple of times throughout the 52 hours I spent with the game. You know, like, and people, you don't like the Tripcaster, do you?
I didn't find it that useful.
I love that thing. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't discover the slingshot until way late in the game.
Oh, the blast sling?
Yeah.
That thing is so overpowered. It's
just
wonderful.
shreds everything.
Yeah.
But it uses a lot of resources to craft that ammo. And yeah, the combat and story are the biggest surprises. Like, I expected the combat to be interesting, but not to be this varied and stressful. And to maintain that for 50 hours is really surprising.
They do a really solid job with pacing out the introduction of new robots.
Yeah.
I think this has been kind of a topic recently, maybe just among our Discord, but it feels like a lot of people have been talking about it recently because of Zelda. A lot of people have been talking about discovery, just the sense of discovery and mystery in video games. And I feel like no one's really specifically praised the feeling in Horizon when you open up your notepad and you have 10 question marks in your robot section, and you know somewhere in the world there's 10 brand new robots, and that excitement when you stroll up and you see a robot and you're like, is that a fucking chicken? What is that thing gonna do?
Oh, I hate those guys.
Yeah, and like I feel like the sense of discovering a new enemy type, and then also, there's another level of discovery where it gives you a list of all their weaknesses. It says, like, if you hit this canister, fire stuff happens. If you hit this, electric stuff happens. And
it's almost like the bestiary in The Witcher, where it's like you get all the different weaknesses. Yeah.
But I found that among the weaknesses, there's usually one specific one which is the most effective. And it kind of just gives you like 12 things, like these are all its weaknesses. And then when you discover the one specific one, and you hit it, and it like EMP blasts all the robots around it, it's like, holy shit. And then you feel strong against that robot. It's kind of like going back to the part in Nioh when I was talking about enemy variants and learning the enemies and feeling strong against them. I feel like Horizon does it really well, where you meet a new robot, you feel terrified, it kind of kicks your ass and you kind of just scrape by, and then the next time you kind of find the secret to taking it down effectively, and it feels amazing. And that sense of mystery and satisfaction basically gets delivered 25 times with each new robot variation, and I just thought that was just so awesome. And one of my only negatives of the game is I really feel like it should have just saved one robot for the very, very end. Because as soon as I had discovered all of the robots there was to discover, I think my last one was just like a variation of one of the other robots I'd already discovered. There was like this very slight, just downing feeling when I knew that no matter where I walked, there was like no other robot to shock me. Yeah. So I feel like that's like one of my very few complaints about Horizon. I wish they just kind of pushed one right to the end. But that, for me, one of the best parts of the game was discovering the new robots, figuring out how to fight them, and just having that slowly dripped out to you as you progress through the game.
I think on the topic of negatives, the human combat is like, they're so dumb.
Yeah.
I know some people like to just like hide in the bushes and do the whistle and just endlessly stealth kill, but I would just headshot every single enemy in the base
Yeah, you can do a bandit camp without being detected by just walking around and headshotting.
Oh yeah, like no problem. And most of the bows do kill most of the humans in one single headshot, and they're just ridiculously stupid. Like the focus was very clearly on the robot combat, and that combat is so good that it made me like I sort of forget that there is even human combat in that game, because there's not tons of it. It's like the bandit camps and a few story missions, and you know. And then also I think I found the side quests to be they're fine. Okay. They're fine. Yeah. Like it's hard after The Witcher 3 where it's like the side quests are what make that game really so special, whereas this is like there's good variety, and the side quests actually do a really good job of taking you to the little like nooks and crannies of the world, where it's like, oh, I didn't think that this was an area I could get to, but here I am. So and a couple of them are really good. Like there's the one with the crashed thing with
that one always sticks out in my memory for some reason. That's the first one I think of.
Yeah, that one almost seems like a main story mission in terms of like world intrigue, but for the most part they're kind of just simple, not very involved, and the writing's not terribly interesting. But it's that one and the Red Moss stuff I thought was all really great, and then everything else was like, this is fine. You know, it's harmless.
Yeah. I feel like the combat is so satisfying in the game that they could kind of be a bit more lenient with the side quest not being the most creative thing in the world, because if you follow a Witcher trail and then you end up fighting a few robots, you still end up having a good time.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I actually would have liked to have seen them done more sort of Monster Hunter-y type quests, like the Red Moss stuff, because I think that would actually be... I think that's something that they should expand on in the next game, like do more Witcher contracts in Horizon. Like, I think that would be really cool. But, you know, it's not perfect by any means, but it's the strengths. There are so many strengths that it makes it, like, almost hard to even think of or to recall, like, what were the things that I didn't love about this?
Well, we haven't even talked about how good the robots look. Like, the animation,
how
like,
good
the amount of
everything
moving
in the game looks. It's absurd. This is an open world game on a fucking PS4 or Pro, which I played it on a Pro, and it looks unbelievable. It
does look incredible.
It is the best looking game on consoles, I think. I think it looks better than Uncharted 4 almost all the time, even though parts of games look better. Like the faces, obviously, in Uncharted 4 look better, you know. But as a whole, like, this is an open world game with a dynamic time of day, and it's a big world, and there are, like, no loading screens, and it looks fucking unbelievable.
It does.
I took way too many pictures playing this game, and
you should put your screenshot album in the description.
Sure, I will.
There's some good caps.
It was like the first game that made me go like, oh, this is why the PS4 Pro exists. This is why you need to buy a 4K television, is this game, to look at this game, because it is quite unbelievable.
Yeah, that's one of the things that has been a little bit difficult about jumping from this to Zelda.
Yeah,
because in Horizon, you see this incredible world, incredible gameplay, and like the package is there, and then they just kind of put a nice little bow on top, and it's like all wrapped up, and it's just like done, it's shiny. And then with Zelda, which we're going to save for next episode when we talk about March and April, they have this great package, and then the bow kind of just flops over the side, and like, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's hardware and just general like design differences in philosophy.
Yeah, but what we're saying is it's just polished as hell.
Yeah,
so polished.
Really, the thing that I liked most was the writing in the world, which we've said was good, but we haven't really got into it. Like, Aloy is an excellent character. She's a little, you know, she's got the right amount of personality, but while still maintaining, you know, a neutrality that makes it really easy to like her. The main quest is fascinating.
Great sense of mystery in the main quest.
Yes, a superb sense of mystery. Questions. They ask so many questions, and then answer them.
All of them.
And constantly, like in the first couple hours of that game, you're like, oh my god, what is this, who's that? And then like another hour later they're like, oh, this is that, and this is the world. And then 6 hours later you get a huge exposition dump, and it's like, oh, this has to be like near the end of the game. And you're like, oh no, this is only like the beginning of what's happening in the world and story. And that they're able to make the modern, quote unquote, modern world, tribal world, super interesting is really impressive. But then they also have this entire history of the ancient world that is even more interesting and engaging and exciting and surprising. And
they essentially build two worlds at the same time.
Two very different worlds of equal interest. And I was glued to my TV through all of the main quests that involve the history of what happened to the world. I couldn't wait to find out.
I think this might be some of the best world building that's ever been in video games by quite a large amount.
I definitely agree. Yeah, it's
such a abstract and like audacious concept. The story, it's just mental, and the fact that they put so much time into making it not only be fun but make complete like logical sense.
Yeah, and that like most of the main quests where you learn about those things, it's literally just you walking through an environment, listening to audio logs and learning things,
and you can't wait to do it.
Yeah, and it's like, and there were times where they made like reveal the big plots of the history, and I was like holding my head being like, oh my god, what? Like some of the plot stuff is fucking great.
Yeah. If somehow in some different parallel universe, if somehow like HBO had managed to steal the concept and the writers for this show and they turned it into something, it would have been like a global phenomenon. It would have like destroyed Game of Thrones. Like this level of storytelling is like better than movies and television, in my opinion.
Yeah, and
it helps that I'm a sci-fi nerd and that this stuff interests me, but I really...
Well, it's also like the delivery of it, I mean, this slow learning of the past through these like little stories is I really like that way of learning about a world, and it's something that you can only really do in games that I find really satisfying, where it's just like... And parts of that story are like genuinely depressing and kind of a bummer, where like the things that happened, the way the world went away is a downer.
It's really dark. Yeah, it's really dark.
And even just seeing the world, like seeing the wrecked out skyscrapers, like, hundreds and hundreds of years after they've been, completely forgotten, just seeing the world, like a world that looks a lot like our current modern world with skyscrapers and highways and stuff like that, seeing it so decrepit and forgotten is kind of scary in a way, or depressing. It's like, oh, like this is literally what the planet will look like one day when there are no more people around. It'll just be like this overgrown, forgotten thing. And
it's kind of a post-apocalyptic game.
Yeah, well, it's a They actually, I think their term was post-apocalypse, which is a really cool way to do it, where it's like the apocalypse has happened and then this huge time span has passed. And
cool.
They do good stuff. Like I was surprised at how emotional some of it was, where it's like, oh, this is actually kind of genuinely sad to listen to and watch and learn about. It's like these shit went real bad.
Yeah.
And I was glued to it the whole time. And the modern world is equally as interesting. They do a great job of building culture in the modern tribal world, and having
interesting ones.
Yeah, having all the cultures like it reminds me of The Witcher 3, where it's like the culture, you look at it and it's like, oh, and then you look at the land that the culture exists in and you're like, oh, this makes sense. Like the Karja are the way they are because they're from the desert, and they worship the sun. And
did you read the little
I read everything.
Extract where they're wandering through and they find the spire and they set up, and that's why they praise the sun, all that stuff?
Yeah, and they do a great job of making it so that the cultures feel like a part of the world in a really, really realistic way, and make the history of the current tribal world really interesting, because there's been a long time that's passed since the ancient, world that we know currently as normal humans has disappeared. There's been several hundred years, and there's a lot that's happened as these tribes have sort of like come about and their religions have formed, and they have had kings and wars and genocides and all these different things. And
you have the really fun contrast of the past future world where man's playing God and creating these dinosaurs, and then it flips over to the reverse where now the dinosaurs have become people's gods and they're praising the sun. It's a really fun backwards and forwards, and they pace it out just really, really well.
They also, last point with the story and writing is they sort of like, I'm trying to think of what I had a comparison on my head and I can't remember, where it's like you write something and then you film it or make the game or whatever, and then you release it. And it just so happens that what you wrote at the time when you were writing it, you weren't writing it to have it be like a modern, like really on the nose thing. But by the time it releases, House of Cards, when it started, an insane president didn't seem that, it's like, oh, this is fun entertainment. Now, House of Cards seems irrelevant, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, this is a case where like, when they started this, and then by the time they released it, it just sort of worked out perfectly, where they've got like a lot of environmentalism in their storytelling and nature, like respecting nature and feminism and all that stuff just happens to come out, in the game right now, where it feels really relevant.
I didn't think
but it
about
doesn't
that,
feel on the nose. It feels very natural in the
writing. Doesn't feel pandering to anyone.
No, not at all. It just feels like very human, and in a way that not a lot of games do, where it's just like there's great variety in the people. People are strong, but also, they've got weaknesses, and there's a variety to the writing of the characters that is really impressive and feels very, very on point. And good for them.
The way they just laid out the game just made for a really, really impressively paced game, a satisfying game for sci-fi nerds who love world building and stories, and it just played like some of the best third-person action games we've ever played. They just ticked so many boxes, man.
Yeah, it's really, it makes me so happy for them,
It's the Killzone people.
Yeah, it reminds me of like seeing CD Projekt go from, The Witcher 2, which was a successful but very hardcore limited audience RPG for the PC, and then seeing them just explode with The Witcher 3 and be like, these are now one of the top developers on the earth that I cannot wait to see what they do next. And it's really exciting to see that happen to Guerrilla, where it's like, they were always very solid, and they've made the Killzone games were all totally fine, but now they are like, they've shown that they are capable of really incredible games in every way that you want a game to be good. They've
showed a lot of skill in one package.
Yeah, and now it's like, I can't wait to see. I want them to do DLC. I want them to do a sequel. Give me more of this.
They could write a book, and I would buy it.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And it's really cool to see a developer just skyrocket up the sort of like top tier of developers out there, and good on them. And good on. It's also sort of triggers like this. I am now more excited about the future of games from Sony, because it's like Sony showed that they're willing to risk making a brand new IP, and I feel like we haven't really had much of that this generation. And so it sort of made me think like, oh, maybe this means we will get more from everyone, more new experiences, because new experiences are the best experiences that you can get from games. And I hope that this is, I hope that there's more along the lines of this. It doesn't have to be as exciting as this game, but if there are more new worlds and stories and games, that's great, because it's been
that is great.
A sequel-heavy generation. Yeah. Well,
I think we liked it.
Yeah.
So that was our paid review for Horizon Zero Dawn.
So I gave it 6 out of 5. That's how much I like it. Best game of all time, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. 97 on Metacritic.
Yeah.
Well, that is the first review breakdown for 2017. We're going to keep these coming. The next one will be May.
Yeah.
March,
probably
April. Yeah. And that should be a good one. We will have Mass Effect. We will have Zelda.
And who knows
I should have something might sneak out. But also, yes, we have Snake Pass and Ukulele in April. So we've got two big AAA games in March, and in April we got two kind of indie platformers. So some weird variation there. So I'm looking forward to talking about those games. That should be a nice mix.
Snake Pass Game of the Year 2017.
Oh yeah, I cannot wait. But thank you guys very much for listening. Hope you guys are looking forward to more of these talking videos. As we said, one every 2 months. There should be 6 this year, minimum, if we don't decide to do anything else, along with our obvious top 10 of 2017, which will be beginning of 2018.
Don't say that out loud. 2018, oh no, I don't want to think about that.
Yeah, but if you like these videos, there's more of them to come. We like talking about video games. Hopefully you enjoy listening. Any closing words?
Video games are a solid entertainment medium. The end.
It's going well. Thank you guys for listening. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.